intersecting lines. Now, this one can be a little challenging for some students. So what I'm going to start off is with a different example to begin with. So one example is, let's talk about what it means to be perpendicular. Now, we've already learned about what perpendicular lines are. Perpendicular lines are the lines that cross at one specific spot. And what's special about them is that they are crossing what it means perpendicular. It means actually at a 90-degree angle. Now, the thing about this is that if let me label a couple here. If I say this side, where I have my 90 degrees is equal to A, and if I say, okay, if you know A is 90, well, what is B? Well, you would say, well, these are perpendicular lines, which means that they create 90-degree angles all the way around. So you would tell me, well, B, based on what the rule is, says that it also has to be 90 degrees. And I'd say that is true. So then we start changing. I say, okay, let's not talk about exactly what perpendicular is. Let's change a little bit. Let's change those angles just a little bit. So I go like this. And I make more of a cross. Oh, that's an ugly cross. Let me try it. I make more of a cross. There we go. It's a little bit better. And I say, okay, now we're going to apply the same kind of rules that we do with perpendicular a little bit. Now, what we have to imagine is that these are like scissors, okay? And with a scissor, if one side opens a certain amount, the other side will open the exact same amount. So if I go by that idea, and I say, okay, this angle up here is going to be 30 degrees, and I call it A. And then I say, well, what do you think B is going to be? And you'd say, well, if you're telling me that they're like scissors and they're opening up at the same angle, then I would say, well, I guess then that would make it 30 also. And I'd say, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Now, and then I'd say something like this. Hey, let's go back to that perpendicular idea, okay? And I said, hey, one of the things that you told me, or that we understand is that this is a straight line. And I'd say, yeah, that's a straight line. And I'd say, or what if I called it a straight angle? Oh, okay, well, what's straight angle? Remember straight angle? Straight angle is the one that says if you have a straight, let's say line, then it's actually equal to 180 degrees. It's straight. Now, if that's true, then that also says if this angle here is 90 degrees, then what would be the angle over here? And you'd say, well, if I know they have to be 180 degrees together, then it would be also 90, right? And then, yeah, because 90 and 90 would make 180. All right. Now, I'm going to apply that idea here. Watch this. I'm going to color in this line. And I'm going to apply the same idea, the exact same idea. I'm going to say, hey, that green straight line, how much is it going to be worth? Or what is its value if I called it a straight angle? Say, oh, well, if it's a straight angle, then it would be 180, right? Yes. Now, do you remember what supplementary angles are too? It means that if I know one angle is 30, and I have another angle over here, and I tell you that, hey, together, these are going to be 180 degrees. You'd say, okay. So what you're telling me is that I have part of an angle. Let's see if I get a little color in here. Let's do purple. Let's see what we get in here. Let's say you have that thing, and it's creating an angle right here of 30 degrees. And now you have a missing. And I tell you, hey, remember, the whole thing has to be 180. Say, well, if it has to be 180, and I already have part of it, then it would tell me that the remaining is what's left over. That's the measure of that angle there, created here. I'd say, yes, that's exactly right. This is kind of what the idea is when we started talking about perpendicular. And then the lesson was complementary, bringing up two angles. Then it was supplementary, bringing up two angles. Also, now we're talking about 180 degrees, and it's talking about relationships built between them. So now we're going to apply that same idea again, and we're going to do it right here. Now I'm going to get another color. Now this could be a little bit, it takes a little while to understand, and it does take a little bit of practice, okay? And I say, look, you have a straight line. And I'd say, hey, every time we see straight lines, this is kind of what I teach students. I say, hey, every time we see straight lines, what's that number that should come up into your mind? Hopefully you would say 180 degrees. Because this is kind of what's the idea of it. It's going in one direction from another, in another direction from another, and the angle that it creates is 180 degrees. Okay? So if I say, okay, that's right. Now, I want you to disregard everything underneath. And I come over here and I go, don't look at that because it could be quite distracting. And then I say, look, all we're going to focus on is that green line, and I'm going to paint another line. Watch, the blue piece that's coming out right here. And I'm going to paint the blue piece. And I say, now look, all we're going to do is focus on that green line and the blue piece. And I'd say, hey, if in a previous example, you saw something that looked like a straight line and then had one angle coming out this way. And they were talking about relationships, about angles. Remember, they were talking about, well, if you know this piece, then what is this piece over here? And you'd say, well, that's supplementary, right, Baron? That's when they're talking about that 180 degrees. And then they're saying, well, if you know this one, then you know the other one because they have a relationship. And I'd say, exactly. That's exactly the idea that is going on again. Now, I want to focus on a couple of things. I want to say, okay, if we're going to come up with the idea of supplementary, I want to focus on, let's say you knew this one. Let's say I tell you this one right here is 48 degrees. And then I'd say, okay, and we're going to think about supplementary. We're only thinking about this idea while we look at the green line and the blue piece that's coming off from it. And I'd say, okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to solve for that missing one. You'd say, okay, well, I'm going to use the rule of supplementary in order to figure that out. I'd say, yeah, that's a good idea. So you'd say, okay, well, let me go ahead and have my 180 and take back my 48. And what is that? A 2 or 3? I think that's a 3. Yeah, 132. Sounds about right. So let's say I have this and I'm like, okay, now what is the 132? You'd say, well, the 132 is going to be on the other side. I'd say, yeah, that's right. The 132 is over there. And what's the rule? You'd say, oh, that's supplementary because one side is that, one side is that. I'm going to say, okay. Now let's talk about what we did about the scissors. Okay, remember the idea about the scissors is that if you have lines, remember the crisscross? The crisscross idea? And it said, well, with the scissors, if you know this one, then you're going to know the one opposing it, the other side. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to erase some of the red a little bit, and we're going to look at just a little bit more of what's going on down there. Now, again, I'm going to take apart points. I don't want you to focus too much on what's going on down there because that is not where we're at yet. So don't look at that. It's not important. So what I'm going to do now is extend those lines a little bit. I'm now going to extend the blue line to go this. Hold on a second here. Get my drawing pen. Come on, drawing color. Here we go. Here we go. And I want to extend this out. Come on. Here we go. I want to extend my line this way. So now look, what I'm trying to do now is I'm creating a scissor situation. There's the scissors, okay? So I'm going to say, okay, now we have scissors, right? Where it can look something like that. If you imagine, you turn your head sideways. I say, okay, you see the scissors? Like, okay, I think I can see the scissors. And I say, okay, look, here's the 48. You see its angle, it's right here. You say, what's going to be its opposing side? You say, well, it's going to be on that side, right? Like, yeah, that's that side for scissors. So I'm going to say, what is that? Remember this rule? You can say, oh, yeah. Well, if I know this, then I know that. I'm like, okay, so if it's 48 over here, what's it over there? 48. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly right. But remember the rule about scissors is that not only do those oppose, but you also have, let me use a different color now because I think we're starting to get a little bit confusing. So let's say, okay, what about this angle that's created? If this is a number, what about the other side of it? You're like, oh, well, it makes sense that it would be the same thing too. And I'd say, exactly. So I'd say, look, if you got the 248s, what about the 132? Doesn't it have an opposing side? And don't you know its value also? Like, oh, yeah, I guess that's going to be 132 also. And I'd say, yes, it is. That's going to be 132. Now, looking at the whole thing, you have everything. Oh, that's awesome. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take away the red stuff. Now, what I want you to imagine is this. They're going to use words like parallel when they talk about this, because they're going to say you have a parallel line here, you have a parallel line here, which means those lines are exactly, they have the exact same distance from each other. They're going in the same direction. They never get closer or further away. They are exact replicas of each other. And what they're going to say also is you have this line here. Now, I'm going to call this line A. Let me give it a color. I'm going to call this line A, with that line there. And they're going to call that one the intersecting line. So you're going to have the vocabulary words. You're going to have the vocabulary word parallel. And now you know the two parallel lines. It means this one and this one. And then you're going to have the word intersecting. And it's going to be the one that goes between them right here, this A line. And this is the vocabulary they're going to introduce when this is being taught. So the idea about this is that whatever is happening here, I'm going to go ahead and highlight a situation. Let me get a lighter color though. Oh, let's see what's going on. Whatever situation is happening right here, it's going to be the exact situation that is occurring here. And the reason is because parallel lines are exact replicas of each other. And when that intersecting line comes at a specific angle between them, as it is, it creates exact situations of angles. You'll notice if I highlight, let me get a little ready color. If I highlight this 48 right here, you'll notice that it's 48 right there. Also, that means that the situation that was created in the top, on the first line, this green line here that is parallel, this guy here, it's going to be the exact thing that happens here. So if this is 48, then its opposing is 48. If the other side is 132, then the opposing is 132. And that is what happens when an intersecting line goes through parallel lines. Again, it is built on a lot of rules. You heard the rules, the supplementary rules, the rules about opposing lines, and there's a lot of things going on. So please take your time with this one. It does take a little bit of practice to see what is going on.